I had the pleasure of speaking with Sonia Malkine, widow of Georges Malkine, one of the original participants in the Surrealist movement in Paris of the 1920s. In addition to playing a formative role in Malkine's return to painting after many years away from the easel, Sonia has, since the 1960s, had a dedicated following as a folk singer in Woodstock, New York, where the couple settled after leaving France. We began our discussion with how World War II had impacted Malkine's ability to paint, and how Sonia coerced him to rekindle his artistic persona.
He had stopped painting for years. He didn't paint at all. And so when we first being acquainted, I said, I heard you're a painter. Where are your paintings? He lived in a small room, horrible place. And there was no painting in there. I said, where are your paintings? He said, I haven't painted in years. I said, what do you mean? I heard you're a wonderful painter. And he said, well, it's a matter of opinion, but I haven't painted in so long. I said, well, I think you're going to have to start again. And I bought brushes. I didn't know anything about brushes or paint, but I chose a whole bunch of stuff. And I brought it to him. I said, here, go ahead and paint. So he said, well, I don't have anything to paint on. I said, well, go and find yourself a piece of canvas or something. So that's what he did. Even when he was here with the children, it was very, very hard for him to paint with the kids. Even when they were at school all day, I said, well, you have time during the day. He said, yeah, but they're coming back, and then it breaks his concentration. It was very difficult for him to paint here. Mm-hmm. As you can see from his painting, the different times, different styles, totally different one from the other. Some were very graphic, and some were very human forms, and so he started to paint, and then he decided to go back to Paris. He couldn't paint here. So there's a lot of painters in Woodstock. He said, you call them painters, He didn't want to have anything to do with the painters here. Nothing. He didn't like their clique. He was a loner,
Right.
And the fact he married me was something that I quite understood. But, so he didn't have anything to do. What he did, he walked every morning. That was his exercise. He walked all the way to Woodstock and back. And some people who knew him every morning, they saw him walking and they offered him a ride, Said, no, thank you, I want to walk. So he was the man who walked, He made this one, that little drawing of me that he made That's the first year we were in Woodstock. It was a strange story because somebody had asked me if he wanted to make my portrait, and I said, no, thank you, I married a painter. I don't think he would appreciate that. And so I said to Georges, we have been married for 4 years, 5 years, and I never posed for you. What, don't you like me or something? He said, all right, okay. And turn your head a little bit that way, yes. But sit down there. Just sit down. So he gave me something to read, so I would go looking down. And so he started drawing. Probably a couple of hours. And there was a lamp on my side like this, and the lamp was right on me. And after a couple of hours, suddenly, it was very strange. I felt like my heart was beating faster and faster and faster. And I was fascinated. I said, gee, what's happening to me, And suddenly, the bulb exploded. Totally, in 1,000 pieces. And I had glass all over my hair. And Georges put down his pencil and he said, it's finished. And that was it. He never touched it again. That's the story of this thing.
Your husband painted a lot of chairs.
Yes, we were talking about that with Fern yesterday.
Okay.
I think he never explained to me what the chairs was, but I think it was some kind of a restful thing, some kind of tranquility. It must represent some kind of peace for him, I'm only suggesting because I never mentioned it. And he painted many chairs. A lot of painting with a little one or a big one or one in the water. I mean, he painted all kinds of chairs. So it must have meant something to him, but I never knew exactly what.
Did you talk often about his painting, or is it something that he was secretive about even with you?
No, we never talked about it. And one day I came back from work and he was burning the whole thing in the garden. Paintings that he had done for a few months or a year, I forget. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I just didn't like them anymore." I said, "Sure, you could have painted over them, you know." He said, "No." Because he was doing sand painting. He would mix sand with the paint, and that would give kind of a relief, you know, on the picture. And I said, you could have used the canvas." He said, "No, I just couldn't do it." So he started all over again, and we were so broke. Yeah, broke we were. I found a job at the radio station, and the radio people there they were oh God, they were very conservative. Let's put it that way. And because I was friends with Pete Seeger, I was a commie. You know, that was back in the '60s. And one day I had asked to not only my job was what they call the traffic. I was doing a list of everything that goes on the air, and I gave it to the microphone. And beside that, it was the time folk music was really blooming at the time, and I was getting involved with the folk music people, and I asked if I could have a show on the air for half an hour music once a week, which they did. Of course, they didn't realize what folk music was about it, you know. And then I called Pete and I said, "I'd like to have an interview with you to put it on the air." Because at that time, that's when he had problem with an American Activities Committee. You remember they put him in jail. I mean, it was a horrible. So I went to Pete Seeger's house and we had an interview, and I asked him what had happened with this committee, you know. So he told me the whole story, and I came back proud, very proud of myself at the radio station. "Hey, I have an interview with Pete Seeger, you know." He said, "You what?" I said, "I interviewed Pete. He told me all about this problem." He said, "Well, let's see what's on the show." So I played it for them. He said, "You cannot do it. You cannot put this thing on the air. Impossible. This guy is a comic. You cannot put." And I said, "My show is tonight. What am I going to do?" He said, "Well, do whatever you want, but you cannot put this on the air." So I went home in a fury, and I took all my Pete Seeger's records, and that night, on the air, you couldn't stop me, I had a tribute to Pete Seeger. And the next morning I was fired. Now my husband was out of work. We had 4 kids, and now I lost my job. So this was the situation in the '60s. So we had a hard time. We had a very hard time.
Of course.
I got a job as a waitress, and then I started posing for all the artists in town. Finally, somebody decided that I was worth painting beside my husband. That's the only thing he did of me, you know.
Right.
And so I started being a model in this town, and I posed for years and years.
Can you remember the artists that you posed for?
Ed Chavez, Manny Bromberg, yeah. Rachel Martin. I don't know.
You worked for all the big names?
All the big names.
That's wonderful.
So that's what we made a living. So in the meantime, I said to my husband, maybe you should try to sell your paintings. And he said, "I'm not a merchant. What do you want me to do? I can't do that." I said, "Well, what are you painting for? You don't want to sell them?" He said, yeah, but I don't want to do it." So I said, "Okay, I'll try." So I took one of his paintings, and the painting was a room with the sun coming out from a window, and the chair. And on the chair there was a chicken, all plumed, all naked, ready to be cooked, on plate on the chair. And so I bring it to Mrs. Rudolph, and she said, "Well, that's a very strange painting. I don't know if I can sell it." I said, "Well, you can try, She was ready to sell the painting, and then she calls me and she said, "I have a buyer for your painting, but she has something that she wants to ask you." So I said, "Okay, so I'm coming." So I got there, and the lady said, "I love your husband's painting, but that chicken really bothers me. Do you think your husband would mind very much if he took off the chicken off the painting?" I said, "Oh my God." I come home and I said, "Georges, I could sell that painting, but you have to take the chicken off the chair." And I never saw Georges so angry. He said, "They want me to do what? She doesn't like that chicken on the chair. Could you erase it or do something with it, take it off?" He said, "Go get my painting back. I don't want her to have it, and I don't even want that woman trying to sell it. Bring it back."
Tell me what happened with the Woodstock Artists Association. I know that they didn't accept one of his paintings, and tell us a little bit about that.
He said, "You mean my painting have been all over Europe? They are in a museum in Paris, and they don't want my paintings here?" So that did it. The Artists Association, you should never mention it to Georges again.
Well, now they want to do a full retrospective of him, so their opinion has changed over the years.
Have changed, times have changed,
right,
and
right.
Tastes for paintings have changed.
I've read and learned of so many examples of Georges avoiding the public, and even in many ways hiding or running from fame. He didn't want to have anything to do with it.
That's why he was alone. He didn't want to. That's why he didn't want to get to the association who could have helped him. He did some movies though. At one time, he was an actor. And he was an actor on stage too. He was in a play at the beginning of our relationship, I remember, in Paris, in a very strange, surrealist kind of a play. Of course, he would be. And he did all kind of movies, adventure movies. He was a sailor on a ship that was sinking or something, and he was an Indian in the Yukon or something. I mean, all kind of strange things,
It's fascinating. Georges seems to have two very distinct sides. One outgoing, comical, theatrical, and then one reclusive.
Very private.
Were these different moods that came out according to the day or according to what?
No, that was his room in the back there. My room was over there, and all the children were upstairs. And when you wanted to be alone, you would close that door, and that was it. You're not supposed to distract him or disturb him or call him or anything. The door was closed, and that was it. So I got used to it, And I was busy with the children anyway. I had plenty to do with the four of them.
You mentioned Cheyenne, and it reminds me of the fact that when Cheyenne was a very little girl, she actually watched Georges take 27 of his paintings and set them on fire. You were at work when this happened, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I probably would have interfered. Right. I don't know if I would have succeeded, but I probably would have said something. Mm-hmm. But by the time I came home, it was too late.
I wanted to get back to some questions about music, because I know that Georges was mostly interested in classical and jazz, and you were a folk singer. Yeah. Are you the one who introduced him to folk music, or?
I tried. He was not that interested in folk music. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was born in classical music. Both his parents, all the uncles and aunts, they're all musicians. They're all classical musicians. His father was a violinist. His mother was a pianist and a violinist. She played both instruments. Her sister, she had a sister who played the cello. She had a sister who played the piano. And he turned out to be a painter. He was the old man out. I mean, what do you mean you want to paint? don't you want to play music? He said, well, there's so much music around here. He didn't feel comfortable about it. But when we got the piano, he could sit at the piano and improvise. He would improvise by the hour until I would get out of my mind. And I couldn't stop him. That was his thing. You couldn't interfere with what he was doing. So we had life together and separately at the same time, which was kind of comfortable in a way, kind of unusual for people to live that way. I found that, with other people. But it was all right. It was all right. And then he went back to Paris. But all his friends, one by one, started dying off. And then one of his best friends, Desnos, was arrested during the war, sent to Auschwitz or whatever. And not in Auschwitz, in Czechoslovakia, anyway, some concentration camp. And he was liberated. But he was in such condition that he died along the way. And Georges was terribly moved by the death of his friend, because Desnos and they were very close. And then...
How did he receive the news of Desnos's death?
Oh, he cried. And that was probably the first and only time that I saw Georges cry, when he learned that Desnos was dead. It was just too much for him. It was just awful. Especially the way that he died on the road amongst strangers. And it was funny because there was a young man there who was very interested in surrealism, also who was just coming back from the camp with him. And he realized who Desnos was. So he got to be friendly with him, and when he died, he took his papers and his wife's address and some of his friends. And so when he went to France, he went back to Paris and talked to his friends about Desnos being dead.
Other friends of Georges included Antonin Artaud.
Yeah.
How did Georges' feelings towards Artaud compare to those of Desnos? Did he talk about him?
Yeah, he didn't talk about him, but the way that I met Artaud, well, I didn't meet Artaud. We were walking on Boulevard Montparnasse, Georges and I, and we were walking this way, and the other way came Artaud. He didn't see us, but Georges saw him. So he said, "Stay right here," he says to me, "stay right here." And he ran across the street, and he gets to Artaud, and he embraced this guy. And I said, what in the world is going on here? And I was tempted to go back, to go across the street to find out who this man was. But he had told me, "Stay there." And the way he had said it, I was not going to disobey. So after a while, Artaud went away, and he came back. And I said, "Why, where did you do this? Who was this guy?" He said, "This was Artaud." Who is Artaud? I didn't know anything about him. That's the way I did not meet Artaud.
How about Breton? Did you ever have the opportunity to meet André Breton?
No, I didn't meet him. They were very close to Breton, and what's the other guy? The one who was
closest with Tanguy and Masson, with painters.
Tanguy, Masson, and the other one who was there when he died.
Aragon?
And Neveu,
No.
you're talking about Puget. And
Puget.
Neveu.
Puget, the writer, Puget. They were very close.
And Neveu.
And Neveu, who was also a writer. And but those were friends from his youth, when he was very young, even before he was a painter. So that was the little group. Aragon too, he liked Aragon very much. In fact, Aragon wrote a long article in his newspaper when Georges died. Neveu, I didn't know him very well. I think I met him once. And that was about his closest friends. And they were all successful, all successful painters, and he wasn't. And his paintings were beautiful, but somehow he just didn't make it. That was not in his stars, I guess.
When Georges decided to go back to Paris in 1966, how did he tell you about this?
Well, it was coming. The children were growing. But he felt very uncomfortable about, and I wanted to sing, that was my thing, and I wanted to go on the road, and I wanted to do something with myself, and he couldn't share that, and I couldn't share it with him any more than I could share his painting. I mean, I adored his painting, not all of them, but most of them. So at one time, when his sister died, that's when he decided to go back to France, and he wanted to at least communicate with all his friends again before they were all gone. So his sister, I think, was a catalyst, and Artaud died, and so he decided to go. I said, why don't you go back? You come back whenever you want. So he went, and he never came back. So I went, and I just went to see him die. So I went to his funeral, and there was just a family and a couple of friends. But it was not a big deal,
Lo balerolero